Well, the president is all set now to shield potentially millions of illegals from deportation through a series of executive actions. But does he remember what he said himself on this subject?
The notion that I can just suspend deportations through executive order, that's just not the case.
A lot of people have been saying this lately on every problem, which is just sign an executive order. And we can pretty much do anything and basically nullify Congress. And unfortunately, well, wait, before everybody starts clapping. That's not how it works.
I'm the President of the United States. I'm not the Emperor of the United States. My job is to execute laws that are passed. For me to simply, through executive order, ignore those congressional mandates would not conform with my appropriate role as president. I would be ignoring the law in a way that I think would be very difficult to defend legally. So that's not an option.
All right, so from not an option to now very much an option to constitutional attorney David Applegate, who says the president had it right the first time. It is not an option, certainly not one that is legal, but yet he's poised to do so. First, what do you think changed? And secondly, what do you think happens if he goes through with it?
I think what's changed, Neil, is that you're seeing a very frustrated president who lost badly again at the midterms after announcing that he wasn't on the ballot, but his policies were. Having seen those rejected and having only 2 years left in which to cement his legacy, he is looking for, number one, something that he can do that will leave an impression on history, and number two, something that will shore up his political party's base for the 2016 election. So that's what I think this is all about.
Is it something that Republicans could take to the courts, as some have argued, even bring up on impeachable grounds? What do you think?
The second course, impeachment, is really the only constitutional remedy that Congress has. Suing in the courts is something that the courts really do not want to handle. You have to remember that what we have in our constitutional system is 3 separate co-equal branches, at least in theory. And the court does not want to interject itself any more than it has to in the political process, which is governed by primarily the other 2 branches, Congress and the president. So it'd be a very, very weak move on the part of Congress, first of all, to sue the president in the court. And number 2, the court would likely wash its hands and say this is something to be resolved in the electoral process. So the constitutional remedy is impeachment, but unfortunately, as a result of changes in the 17th Amendment to where people now directly elect the senators and the states do not, and of course the experience with President Clinton's impeachment, politically that would go nowhere.
Well, if you think about what you're saying then, David, if they're going nowhere in the courts, and the impeachment brings with it the risk that you're making a big deal out of something that's going to be a negative for you or boomerang on the party trying it, then the president is emboldened to keep sort of daring it and doing more of it because Republicans fear that it hits them more than it hits the president. So where do we go with this?
Well, the president certainly is very emboldened, and what he's doing is throwing down a challenge both to the presumed majority leader, Mitch McConnell, and to John Boehner. What they would do if they were smart is to realize that they still have 2 very strong cards to play. One is the trump card of the power of the purse. All funding bills must originate in the House, which is even more Republican now than it was before the midterm elections. And Congress could simply look for things to defund, either in retaliation for the president's unilateral executive action or as negotiating leverage. And that takes me to the second point, which is that governing is all about compromise. Now, we have some pretty strong personal views here. We have some pretty strongly divided partisan views, but most of the country is usually in the middle. And so what Speaker Boehner and the Senate leaders should do is actually sit down with the president, if they can get him to do that, and say, look, we are prepared to act on immigration in a constitutional way, in a way that the American people support, We do not want to do that in a lame duck session because the people have rejected your policies. They have elected new legislators. And we will sit down with you and we will craft something that we can enact and implement starting in January 2015. If the president is smart, he will take that deal. Whether he will do that remains to be seen.
Yeah, it looks unlikely, but you never know, David. Thank you very much. David Applegate in Chicago. Meanwhile, how does a government agency